Marcus Chen had always believed that Tuesday mornings were cursed. Today proved no exception as he stood in his cluttered garage workshop, staring at the smoking remains of what used to be a perfectly good plasma welder. The acrid smell of burnt electronics filled the air, mixing with the perpetual odor of motor oil and metal shavings that defined his workspace. Son of a, he caught himself before the curse fully escaped. His neighbor Mrs. Patterson had already complained twice this month about his colorful language carrying through the thin walls of his converted garage workshop. At 32, Marcus had learned that keeping the peace with neighbors was almost as important as keeping his small engineering business afloat. The plasma welder's death meant he couldn't finish the custom exhaust system for Jake Morrison's modified Chevelle. Jake needed it by Friday for the county fair's car show, and Marcus needed Jake's payment to cover this month's rent on the workshop space. The irony wasn't lost on him that he could design theoretical propulsion systems for interplanetary travel in his sleep, but couldn't afford to keep his earthbound tools working. Marcus wiped his grease-stained hands on his already filthy coveralls and surveyed his domain. The single-car garage had been transformed into something that looked like a mad scientist's laboratory crossed with a mechanic's fever dream. Workbenches lined 3 walls, covered with an organized chaos of tools, spare parts, and half-finished projects. Computer monitors displayed engineering schematics alongside diagnostic readouts from various automotive and electronic projects. In one corner sat his pride and joy, a custom-built 3D printer capable of working with exotic metal alloys, a graduation gift to himself after earning his mechanical engineering degree. The workshop represented everything Marcus loved about engineering: the challenge of making things work, the satisfaction of solving problems that stumped others, and the freedom to pursue his own projects. It also represented everything that frustrated him about his current situation. Despite his advanced degree and innovative mind, he spent most days fixing lawnmowers, rebuilding carburetors, and welding farm equipment. The steady income kept him fed and housed, but it felt like using a supercomputer to balance a checkbook. His phone buzzed against the workbench. Sarah's name appeared on the screen, accompanied by her latest profile picture, a professional headshot that somehow made her look both approachable and intimidatingly competent. They dated for 2 years before she moved to Seattle for a position with Boeing's aerospace division. The kind of position Marcus had dreamed about but never quite managed to land. "Hey, Marcus. How's the grease monkey business treating you?" Sarah's voice carried its usual mixture of affection and gentle condescension that made Marcus feel simultaneously loved and inadequate. "Oh, living the dream. Currently trying to resurrect a plasma welder that decided to commit suicide this morning." Marcus cradled the phone between his ear and shoulder while examining the welder's fried control circuit. "Still playing with your toys instead of pursuing real opportunities, I see." Sarah's tone suggested she meant it as gentle teasing, but Marcus heard the underlying message clearly enough. "I told you, there's still time to apply for that position here. Boeing's always looking for innovative engineers, and your work on theoretical propulsion systems was brilliant in school." "My work was theoretical for a reason, Sarah. Real aerospace companies want experience with real projects, not fever dreams about impossible engines." Marcus set down his multimeter and gave the phone his full attention. "Besides, I'm not sure I want to be another cog in the corporate machine. Marcus, you're too talented to waste away in that garage forever. You could be designing systems for the Mars missions, working on next-generation spacecraft propulsion, making a real difference in the world." Before Marcus could respond, a sound unlike anything he'd ever heard cut through the morning air. It started as a high-pitched whine, like a jet engine spinning up, but quickly dropped to a bone-deep thrumming that made his teeth ache. The workshop's fluorescent lights flickered, and several electronic devices began beeping error codes. "Sarah, I need to call you back." Marcus didn't wait for her response before ending the call and stepping outside to investigate the source of the impossible sound. The noise seemed to be coming from the direction of Peterson's old cornfield, about half a mile east of his workshop. Marcus had grown up in this rural corner of Ohio, and he knew every sound the countryside produced: crop dusters, freight trains, highway traffic, and the occasional military transport from the airbase 40 miles north. This sound belonged to none of those categories. As he stood in his gravel driveway squinting toward the cornfield, the sound cut off abruptly, leaving behind a silence so complete it felt unnatural. Even the birds had stopped singing. Marcus waited for several minutes, but the normal sounds of the countryside gradually resumed: distant traffic, a dog barking somewhere, the whisper of wind through the cornstalks. He was about to head back inside when he noticed the smoke. A thin column of black smoke rose from approximately the same area where the sound had originated. Marcus grabbed his tool bag from the workshop, old habits from volunteer firefighting days, and jumped into his battered pickup truck. The engine coughed twice before catching, and he bounced down the dirt road toward Peterson's field. The Peterson farm had been abandoned for 3 years, ever since old man Peterson passed away and his kids moved to the city. The fields were still planted and harvested by a farming corporation, but the house and outbuildings sat empty, slowly surrendering to the elements. Marcus had always found the place vaguely depressing, a reminder of how rural communities were slowly dying as young people fled to urban opportunities. Today, however, the abandoned farm looked anything but depressing. The source of the smoke became apparent as Marcus turned into the farm's overgrown driveway. In the center of what had been Peterson's largest cornfield, a perfectly circular area of crops had been flattened in a pattern that radiated outward from a central point. At that center point sat something that definitely didn't belong in rural Ohio. Marcus parked his truck at the edge of the field and approached on foot, his engineer's mind automatically cataloging details even as his worldview underwent a fundamental reorganization. The object was roughly oval-shaped, about the size of a small aircraft, with a hull that seemed to shift between metallic silver and deep blue depending on the viewing angle. The smoke was rising from what appeared to be damage along one side of the craft, a jagged tear in the hull that revealed glimpses of incomprehensibly complex internal systems. As he got closer, Marcus noticed that the craft wasn't quite touching the ground. It hovered approximately 6 inches above the flattened cornstalks, supported by no visible means. The air around it shimmered with heat distortion, and he could hear a faint humming sound from the undamaged portions of the hull. Holy! Marcus caught himself again, though Mrs. Patterson was nowhere within earshot. He approached the craft slowly, fighting every instinct that screamed at him to run away. His engineering curiosity proved stronger than his survival instincts, a character trait that had gotten him in trouble before but never quite like this. The damage was more extensive up close. The tear in the hull was about 4 feet long and 2 feet wide at its widest point, with edges that looked almost melted rather than torn. Through the opening, Marcus could see systems that defied his understanding of physics. Components that seemed to exist in more than 3 dimensions, energy flowing through crystalline structures in patterns that hurt to look at directly, and materials that appeared to shift between solid and liquid states without any visible temperature change. He was so absorbed in trying to comprehend the alien technology that he almost missed the movement inside the craft. A figure appeared at the breach in the hull, humanoid but definitely not human. She was tall, probably close to 6 feet, with an elegant build and skin that had a subtle luminescent quality. Her hair was long and silver, not the silver of age but like actual metallic silver that caught and reflected light in impossible ways. Most striking were her eyes, larger than human eyes, and a deep violet color that seemed to contain depths like looking into a night sky. She was clearly injured. One arm hung at an unnatural angle, and a dark substance that might have been blood stained her form-fitting garment. When she noticed Marcus, she froze for a moment, then spoke in a voice that sounded like music even though the words were completely incomprehensible. Marcus raised his hand slowly, trying to convey peaceful intentions. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said, knowing she couldn't understand but hoping his tone would communicate what his words couldn't. The being regarded him with what appeared to be curiosity rather than fear. She spoke again, and this time Marcus caught what sounded like a question in her tone. When he shook his head to indicate he didn't understand, she seemed to consider something, then touched a device on her wrist. "Can you understand me now?" The voice was the same musical quality, but now the words made sense. "Yeah, I can understand you." Marcus tried to keep his voice calm and non-threatening. "Are you hurt?" "Your ship, your vessel, it looks damaged." "My ship suffered a cascade failure in the primary energy distribution network while transitioning through your system's gravity well," she explained, and even though the words were being translated, Marcus could hear the frustration in her voice. "The damage has disabled most of my ship's automated repair systems. I am stranded." Marcus's engineer brain latched onto the technical terminology even as the larger implications threatened to overwhelm him. "Energy distribution network, like a power grid for the ship?" The being looked surprised. "You understand the concept?" "I'm an engineer. Energy distribution is energy distribution, whether it's for a house, a car, or..." Marcus gestured at her ship. "Whatever this is. A long-range exploration vessel." She paused, seeming to evaluate him carefully. My name is Zaraka, but your translation system will likely render it as something more familiar to your linguistic patterns. Zara, Marcus said, and she nodded. I'm Marcus. Marcus Chen. He hesitated, then asked the question that had to be asked. You're not from around here, are you? Despite her injuries and predicament, Zara actually smiled at that. The expression transformed her face, making her seem less alien and more, well, still alien, but somehow approachable. No, Marcus Chen. I am not from around here. My home is approximately 47 of your light years distant. Right. Of course it is. Marcus rubbed his face, trying to process the situation. Okay, so you're an injured alien with a broken spaceship in Peterson's cornfield. This is definitely not how I expected my Tuesday to go. You seem to be handling the situation with remarkable composure for a primitive, Zara caught herself. For a member of a species that has not yet achieved interstellar travel. Thanks, I think. Marcus approached the hull breach more closely, examining the damage with professional interest. You said the repair systems are disabled. What about manual repairs? Is this fixable? The damage is extensive but not irreparable. However, the necessary repairs require precise recalibration of quantum resonance frequencies within the power coupling matrix. It is not work that can be performed without sophisticated understanding of multi-dimensional energy manipulation. Marcus nodded as if that made perfect sense. Show me. Zara blinked an oddly human gesture. I beg your pardon? Show me the damage. Explain what needs to be fixed. I may not understand multi-dimensional energy manipulation, but I understand systems, connections, and power flow. Maybe I can help, maybe I can't, but I won't know until I look. You would enter my vessel? You are not afraid? Marcus considered the question seriously. Was he afraid? Absolutely. This was the most terrifying and exciting thing that had ever happened to him. An actual alien spacecraft, an injured extraterrestrial being, and technology beyond his wildest dreams, all sitting in a cornfield less than a mile from his modest workshop. I'm scared out of my mind, he admitted. But you're hurt, you're stranded, and you need help. And, honestly? This is the most interesting engineering problem I've ever encountered. I'd hate to pass up the chance to at least try. Zara studied him for a long moment, and Marcus had the distinct impression he was being evaluated by intelligence far superior to his own. Finally, she nodded. Very well, Marcus Chen of Earth. But, I must warn you, my ship's technology operates on principles that may be overwhelming to your perceptual systems. And if you become a threat to my vessel or my mission, I will be forced to defend myself. Understood. Marcus hefted his tool bag. Fair warning in return, I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing here. But, I've never met a machine I couldn't at least understand, even if I couldn't fix it. Zara's expression suggested she found this statement either amusing or naive, possibly both. She moved aside to give him access to the hull breach, favoring her injured arm. Before we begin, Marcus said, shouldn't we do something about that arm? The injury is not severe. My physiology differs from yours, what appears to be significant damage is actually equivalent to what you might call a sprain. If you say so. But, if you need medical attention, the county hospital is only about 20 minutes away. I appreciate your concern, but human medical technology would likely do more harm than good. My ship's medical systems can address the injury once power is restored. Marcus nodded and approached the hull breach. Up close, the interior of the ship was even more bewildering. The walls seemed to curve in directions that his eyes couldn't quite follow, and surfaces that appeared solid from one angle looked transparent from another. Lights that had no visible source illuminated the space in colors that he was pretty sure didn't exist in Earth's spectrum. This is going to hurt my brain, isn't it? Marcus muttered. Very likely, Zara agreed. Try not to focus too intently on any single component. Your visual cortex was not designed to process multi-dimensional architecture. Great advice. I'll just not look directly at the impossible physics. Despite his sarcasm, Marcus found himself fascinated. Every surface was covered with what appeared to be control interfaces, but, instead of buttons or switches, they seemed to respond to proximity and intent. The air itself felt charged with potential energy. The primary damage is here. Zara indicated a section near what Marcus assumed was the ship's center. A cylindrical structure about the size of a large beer keg sat surrounded by connections that defied geometric description. The cylinder's surface was cracked, and the connections showed obvious signs of energy feedback damage. "That's your main power coupling?" Marcus asked. "Essentially, yes. It regulates the flow of energy from the quantum zero-point generators to the ship's primary systems. The overload damaged both the coupling itself and the distribution network interfaces." Marcus circled the device, examining it from multiple angles. Despite the alien technology, he could see the logic of the system. Energy had to flow from source to destination, had to be regulated and distributed. The principles were the same, even if the implementation was beyond his understanding. "The cracks in the coupling, are those structural or just surface damage?" "The housing is composed of a crystalline matrix that channels energy at the quantum level. The fractures have disrupted the resonance patterns necessary for proper function. So you need to repair the crystal and recalibrate the energy flow." Marcus knelt beside the device, careful not to touch anything. "What about the interface connections?" Zara moved to his side, pointing out damaged components with her uninjured hand. "These conduits carry frequency-specific energy streams. The feedback surge fused several of the connection points and disrupted the harmonic matrices in others." The more Marcus examined the system, the more familiar it seemed. Not the technology itself, but the nature of the problem. He'd seen similar issues in electrical systems, hydraulic networks, even computer architectures. Something had overloaded, created feedback, and damaged both the control system and the distribution network. "I think I understand the basic problem," he said finally. "But I have no idea how to fix crystal matrices or quantum resonance frequencies. Do you have repair protocols? Some kind of manual or diagnostic system?" "The ship's computer contains complete technical specifications and repair procedures. However, the computer interface requires direct neural connection, which would be inadvisable for a human mind." "Right, because the brain damage thing." Marcus stood and brushed dust from his knees. "What about simplified diagnostics? Can your computer tell us exactly what needs to be recalibrated without frying my neurons?" Zara touched the device on her wrist again, apparently communicating with her ship's computer through some kind of wireless link. After a moment, she looked up with something that might have been surprise. "The computer indicates that the repair procedures could be adapted for implementation using non-neural interfaces, but the precision required would be challenging for most species." "Most species meaning most species aren't crazy enough to try, or most species aren't capable enough to succeed?" "Both, likely." Zara regarded him thoughtfully. "Your species has a reputation for attempting impossible tasks through stubborn determination rather than elegant technique. You've heard of humans before? Your world was surveyed approximately 50 of your years ago. The report noted that human engineering tends toward creative solutions to complex problems, often involving approaches that other species would consider unnecessarily complicated or dangerous." Marcus wasn't sure if that was a compliment or an insult. "So basically, we're known for being too stupid to know when something can't be done?" "More accurately, you are known for refusing to accept limitations and finding unconventional solutions. The survey team was quite impressed by your species' tendency to succeed despite using theoretically inadequate methodologies." "Ha! Well, that's something, I guess." Marcus looked at the damaged coupling again. "So what would this repair involve, exactly?" "The crystalline matrix must be annealed at precisely controlled temperatures while specific harmonic frequencies are applied to restore the quantum resonance patterns. Simultaneously, the interface connections must be rebuilt using molecularly aligned conductive materials and tested for proper energy flow characteristics." "That sounds complicated." "It is among the most complex repair procedures possible on this class of vessel." Marcus grinned. "Perfect. When do we start?" For the first time since their conversation began, Zara looked genuinely surprised. "You still wish to attempt this repair? Even knowing the complexity involved?" "Especially knowing the complexity involved." Marcus hefted his tool bag again. "I didn't become an engineer to work on simple problems. And this is definitely not a simple problem. The risk of failure is significant. If the repair is performed incorrectly, it could result in a catastrophic energy release. how catastrophic are we talking? Like, blow up the cornfield catastrophic, or blow up the county catastrophic? Approximately, blow up the cornfield catastrophic. Perhaps slightly more. Okay, so we'll be careful. Marcus looked around the alien interior once more, trying to absorb the reality of his situation. Before we start, I should probably ask, is there anything about this repair that might, accidentally signal your location to hostile aliens or start an interstellar war or something? Zara's expression suggested she was beginning to understand human humor. No, Marcus Chen. The repair will not start an interstellar war. Though I should mention that my mission here is classified, and knowledge of my presence on your world could have significant implications for your species' future development. Great. So no pressure at all. Marcus took a deep breath. Well, in for a penny, in for a pound. Let's fix your spaceship. As Zara began explaining the technical requirements in more detail, Marcus felt a familiar excitement building in his chest, the same feeling he got when facing a particularly challenging engineering problem. The scale was different, the stakes were higher, and the technology was beyond anything he'd ever imagined, but fundamentally this was what he'd always loved about engineering, taking something broken and making it work again. He had no idea if he could actually help repair an alien spacecraft. But Marcus Chen had never backed down from an impossible challenge, and he wasn't about to start now. Outside the ship, the Ohio countryside continued its normal Tuesday routine, completely unaware that in Peterson's old cornfield, a small-town mechanic was about to attempt the most complex repair job in human history. The first challenge wasn't the alien technology, it was convincing Zara that human tools could interface with systems designed by a civilization thousands of years more advanced. Marcus spent the better part of an hour explaining the principles behind his various instruments while Zara looked increasingly skeptical. You propose to measure quantum resonance frequencies using this device? Zara held Marcus's oscilloscope as if it might explode. The instrument looked primitive and bulky compared to the elegant curves of her ship's interior. It's not exactly designed for quantum measurements, Marcus admitted, but frequency is frequency. If your computer can translate the readings into units I understand, we might be able to work with approximations. Approximations. Zara's tone suggested she found the concept both fascinating and horrifying. In quantum resonance calibration, an error of 0.001% can result in cascade failure. Then, we'll have to be very, very careful. Marcus connected his oscilloscope to a tablet computer running signal analysis software he'd written for automotive diagnostics. Look, I know this isn't ideal. But sometimes you have to work with what you've got instead of what you wish you had. Zara watched him jury-rig connections between his Earth-built electronics and interface ports that her ship's computer had grudgingly provided. The computer itself remained skeptical of the entire enterprise, occasionally projecting what Marcus assumed were warning messages in symbols that hurt to look at directly. Your computer doesn't like me very much, does it? Marcus observed as another series of angry-looking symbols flashed across a nearby display. The computer calculates a 97.3% probability that your repair attempt will result in total system failure, Zara explained. It has been suggesting I abandon the vessel and attempt to signal for rescue. And, what do you think? Zara was quiet for a moment, watching Marcus work. I think, she said finally, that my species has grown perhaps too dependent on automation and perfect conditions. We have forgotten what it means to adapt and improvise. Well, humans are really good at adapting and improvising. Mostly because we're too stubborn to admit when something is impossible. Marcus finished his connections and powered up his makeshift diagnostic system. Let's see what we can see. The oscilloscope immediately began displaying waveforms unlike anything Marcus had ever encountered. Instead of the familiar sine waves and square pulses he was accustomed to, the screen showed patterns that seemed to fold in on themselves, creating three-dimensional structures that his equipment shouldn't have been capable of rendering. Okay, that's new, Marcus muttered, adjusting controls that seemed to have no effect on the impossible displays. Your quantum energy patterns are doing things to my electronics that probably violate several laws of physics. The energy operates in higher dimensional space, Zara explained, peering over his shoulder. Your instruments are attempting to display multi-dimensional data in two-dimensional format. The distortions you see are dimensional artifacts. Right. Of course they are. Marcus stared at the screen, trying to make sense of the patterns. Can your computer give me a simplified representation?
Something my primitive human brain can actually work with?
Zara communicated with the ship's computer through her wrist device. After several minutes of what sounded like argument in her musical language, the oscilloscope display shifted to something more recognizable, complex but clearly showing energy patterns, resonance peaks, and frequency relationships that Marcus could actually interpret.
Much better. Now I can see what we're dealing with. Marcus studied the readouts, his engineer's mind automatically analyzing the data. Your quantum resonance frequency is definitely off. See these spikes here? Those shouldn't be there in a properly tuned system. You can interpret the quantum resonance data?
Well, I can interpret the frequency relationships, harmonic distortions, and energy flow patterns. The quantum part is still magic as far as I'm concerned, but the underlying principles look familiar. Marcus pointed to various features on the display.
This looks like what happens when you have impedance mismatches in an electrical system. Energy reflects back instead of flowing smoothly, creating standing waves and hotspots. Zara's expression shifted to something Marcus was beginning to recognize as her equivalent of surprise. That is remarkably accurate.
You are describing quantum impedance cascade failure using primitive electromagnetic analogies.
Hey, primitive analogies work.
Energy is energy, whether it's electrons flowing through copper wire or whatever this quantum stuff is doing in your crystal matrix.
Marcus made notes on his tablet, translating the readings into units and concepts he could work with. The question is, how do we fix it?
The standard procedure requires quantum field manipulation equipment that can adjust molecular resonance patterns at the subatomic level, Zara explained.
Equipment that does not exist on your world. But the end result is what, realigning the crystal structure and adjusting the energy flow characteristics? Marcus was already thinking through possibilities. What if we approached it differently? Instead of quantum field manipulation, what about controlled thermal cycling combined with acoustic resonance? I do not understand. Marcus grinned.
This was the part he lived for, taking impossible problems and finding creative solutions.
Crystals respond to heat and vibration, right? Even quantum crystals have to follow basic physical laws.
What if we can heat the damaged matrix to the point where the molecular structure becomes flexible, then use precise acoustic frequencies to guide it back into the correct alignment?
The precision required would be extraordinary.
The temperatures must be controlled to within fractions of a degree, and the acoustic frequencies must match quantum resonance patterns exactly.
Challenging, but not impossible. Marcus was already mentally cataloging the equipment he'd need.
I've got a computer-controlled furnace back at my shop that can hold temperatures to within 1/10 of a degree. And my signal generator can produce precise frequencies across a wide spectrum.
You possess equipment capable of such precision? Zara sounded skeptical. I built most of it myself.
When you're doing custom fabrication work, precision matters.
The question is whether I can scale up from metalworking to quantum crystal repair.
Marcus spent the next hour taking detailed measurements of the damaged coupling while Zara translated quantum specifications into thermal and acoustic parameters his equipment could handle. The process was like trying to describe color to someone who had been blind from birth, full of approximations, assumptions, and educated guesses. According to my calculations, Marcus said finally, reviewing his notes, we need to heat the crystal matrix to approximately 1247 degrees Celsius while applying acoustic frequencies that start at 27.6 kHz and sweep upward following this specific pattern. He showed Zara his tablet screen, which displayed a complex waveform he'd derived from her ship's diagnostic data. The margin for error is essentially zero, Zara warned. If the temperature is too high, the crystal matrix will undergo irreversible phase transition. Too low, and the molecular structure will not become sufficiently flexible for realignment.
And if the frequencies are wrong? Catastrophic resonance cascade.
The explosion I mentioned earlier.
Right. No pressure. Marcus looked at the damaged coupling, then at his improvised diagnostic equipment, then back at Zara. I need to ask you something, and I want an honest answer. Do you really think this can work, or are you just humoring the primitive human? Zara was quiet for a long moment, considering his question seriously.
When I first encountered you, I calculated the probability of successful repair using your methods at approximately 0.02%. However, observing your approach to problem solving, your intuitive understanding of system relationships, and your species' documented history of achieving impossible results through unconventional means.
And, now I calculate the probability at approximately 12%. Marcus laughed. 12%? That's terrible odds.
It is significantly better than the 0% probability of repair using standard methods without proper equipment, Zara pointed out. And far better than the 0% probability of rescue if my ship remains inoperable.
Fair point.
Marcus gathered his equipment. Alright, let's go to my workshop and build ourselves a quantum crystal repair system out of automotive tools and wishful thinking. The process of moving the damaged coupling from Zara's ship to Marcus's workshop proved to be an adventure in itself. The component weighed significantly more than it appeared, something Zara explained had to do with higher dimensional mass distribution and required careful handling to prevent further damage.
Is it safe to remove this from your ship?
Marcus asked as they maneuvered the cylindrical device through the hull breach.
The coupling is designed for field replacement, Zara assured him.
However, the ship will remain on emergency power only until it is repaired and reinstalled.
What does emergency power get you?
Life support, basic computer functions, and limited defensive capabilities. Enough to sustain me for several of your days, but insufficient for flight operations or long-range communication. Marcus's workshop had never seemed smaller than it did with an injured alien and a piece of quantum technology occupying most of the available floor space. Zara examined his equipment with the same careful attention he had given to her ship's systems, asking detailed questions about capabilities and limitations.
This furnace can truly maintain temperature precision to 0.1 degrees?
She studied his computer-controlled heating system, which suddenly looked far less impressive next to someone who traveled between stars. Better than that under ideal conditions.
I use it for heat-treating custom alloys.
Marcus powered up his systems and began running diagnostics.
The acoustic system is more complex.
I'll need to build a custom speaker array that can generate your frequency patterns with sufficient precision and power.
The acoustic energy must be applied uniformly across the crystal matrix surface, Zara explained. Uneven application could create stress fractures or resonance discontinuities.
I'm thinking a phased array system, Marcus mused, sketching ideas on his tablet. Multiple speakers positioned around the coupling, each one computer-controlled for precise timing and amplitude.
Kind of like the acoustic equivalent of a hologram. You can construct such a device?
I can try. I've got precision speakers from some audio equipment I built a few years ago, and the computer control system shouldn't be too difficult. Marcus was already pulling components from storage bins around the workshop.
The tricky part will be calculating the phase relationships to create uniform acoustic field coverage.
Over the next several hours, Marcus's workshop transformed into something that would have looked equally at home in a mad scientist's laboratory or a high-tech research facility. He constructed a spherical frame around the damaged coupling, mounting 12 precision speakers at carefully calculated positions. Each speaker connected to its own amplifier and digital signal processor, all controlled by a computer system running software he wrote on the fly.
Zara proved to be an invaluable assistant, despite her injury.
Her understanding of the quantum principles involved allowed her to provide guidance when Marcus's engineering intuition wasn't sufficient. More importantly, her ship's computer could run simulations of his proposed repair procedures and provide feedback on likely outcomes. The computer calculates a 23% probability of success with your current configuration, Zara reported as Marcus made final adjustments to the speaker array. That's almost double the original estimate, Marcus said cheerfully.
I'll take it.
However, it also calculates a 31% probability of catastrophic failure resulting in significant property damage.
And the remaining 46%?
Partial success or failure resulting in non-catastrophic damage to the coupling matrix.
Marcus considered these odds while staring at the complex assembly he'd built around the alien device.
You know, in my normal line of work, I'd never attempt to repair with those success rates.
But this isn't exactly normal work, is it?
No, Zara agreed.
It is not.
The way I see it, we've got three choices, Marcus said, settling into his desk chair and regarding their improvised repair setup. We can try the repair with a 23% chance of success, we can try to find another solution with probably worse odds, or we can give up and hope somebody comes looking for you eventually. My mission was classified and operated under communication silence protocols, Zara said quietly. No one will come looking for me for at least 2 of your months, possibly longer.
Well, that settles it then. Marcus stood and began the startup sequence for his furnace system.
Worst case scenario, we blow up my workshop and probably take out Mrs. Patterson's prize-winning roses.
Best case scenario, we get your ship running and you can continue your top-secret alien mission.
Marcus, Zara said, and something in her tone made him look up from his control console. I want you to understand that if this repair fails catastrophically, I will likely be killed.
And you almost certainly will be as well.
Marcus met her violet gaze steadily.
I understand. Do you want to call it off?
No. I am simply ensuring that you comprehend the stakes involved.
I do.
Marcus turned back to his controls. And I still think this is our best shot. Besides, if we die in a quantum explosion while trying to repair an alien spacecraft, that's got to be one of the more interesting ways to go out. Despite her injuries and the gravity of their situation, Zara actually laughed at that. The sound was musical, like everything else about her communication, but it carried the same mixture of humor and resignation that Marcus recognized in human laughter. Your species truly is remarkable, she observed.
Most civilized beings would be paralyzed by fear in this situation.
Yeah, well,
humans aren't exactly civilized by most standards.
We're the species that looked at powered flight and said, sure, let's strap ourselves to controlled explosions and see what happens. Marcus initiated the heating sequence, watching temperature readouts climb steadily toward their target of 1,247 degrees Celsius.
The coupling matrix, suspended in the center of his speaker array, began to glow with a faint inner light that definitely wasn't thermal radiation. The quantum field interactions are becoming visible to human perception, Zara noted, watching the same glow. That should not be possible.
Added to the list of things that shouldn't be possible but are happening anyway, Marcus replied, fine-tuning the temperature control system. We're at 1,200 degrees and climbing.
How's the matrix structure looking? Zara consoled. The return to Zara's ship took place under a canopy of stars that seemed different now that Marcus knew with certainty he wasn't alone in the universe.
As they approached the damaged vessel in Peterson's cornfield, its hull gleamed softly in the moonlight, looking less like an impossible artifact and more like a sophisticated machine that simply happened to operate on principles he was still learning to understand. The interface connection repairs will be more complex than the coupling matrix restoration, Zara explained as they carefully transported the repaired component from Marcus's truck. The connections must be rebuilt at the molecular level while maintaining perfect quantum entanglement with the ship's primary systems. Molecular level reconstruction, Marcus repeated, hefting his expanded toolkit.
Right. Because fixing alien spaceships apparently wasn't challenging enough already. The interior of Zara's ship felt different on their return.
Whether it was familiarity or the fact that emergency power had been running for several hours, the impossible geometry seemed less overwhelming and more like simply another engineering challenge to be understood and overcome. Before we begin the interface work, Marcus said, examining the connection points around the coupling housing, I need to understand something about your technology.
How does quantum entanglement work in practical engineering terms? Zara considered the question while checking her ship's diagnostic systems.
Quantum entanglement allows instantaneous information transfer between paired particles regardless of physical distance. In our technology, it enables energy distribution systems to maintain perfect synchronization across the entire ship. So when we repair these connections, we're not just rebuilding physical pathways, we're re-establishing quantum communication links?
Exactly. The challenge is that quantum entanglement states are extremely fragile.
Any interference during the reconstruction process could permanently sever the quantum links and render the energy distribution system inoperable. Marcus knelt beside the damaged interfaces, studying them with his improvised diagnostic equipment. The connection points looked like crystalline flowers that had been partially melted, their delicate structures warped and fused by energy feedback. Through his oscilloscope, he could see faint quantum signatures that flickered inconsistently like a radio trying to tune in a distant station. The quantum signatures are still there, he observed, but they're weak and unstable. Like the entanglement is trying to re-establish itself but can't quite manage it. The quantum pairs are still viable, Zara confirmed, but the physical interfaces that focus and direct the quantum interactions have been compromised. Think of it like damaged focusing lenses in an optical system.
Okay, so we need to rebuild the focusing structures while the quantum entanglement is still active. Can that be done with the coupling powered down? The coupling matrix maintains minimal quantum field generation even when not actively processing energy.
This residual field should be sufficient for interface reconstruction, but the timing will be critical. Marcus spent the next hour developing a repair strategy that combined his growing understanding of quantum principles with practical engineering solutions. The damaged interfaces would need to be rebuilt using a combination of controlled melting, precise material deposition, and quantum field manipulation. "I think I can adapt my 3D printer for this," he said finally. "Instead of printing with regular materials, we'll need to print with whatever these interfaces are made of."
Do you have raw materials on board?
The ship maintains stocks of programmable matter for field repairs, Zara replied. "However, the programming process requires quantum field manipulation capabilities that your equipment does not possess."
"What if we don't program the matter in advance?
What if we print the basic structure and, then, use controlled quantum fields to program it in place?"
Zara's expression suggested this idea was either brilliant or completely insane, possibly both. Quantum field programming during active fabrication. The precision required would be extraordinary, and any error could result in cascading quantum decoherence.
But, it's theoretically possible?
Theoretically, yes.
Practically. Zara paused, consulting with her ship's computer. The computer calculates a 31% probability of success.
"Our odds are improving," Marcus grinned.
"When we started this morning, you gave me 0.02% chance of fixing anything."
"This is true.
Your unconventional approach to problem solving appears to improve probability calculations significantly." Marcus spent the next several hours modifying his 3D printer to work with Zara's programmable matter. The material itself was fascinating. It looked like liquid mercury but flowed like honey and seemed to respond to electrical fields in ways that reminded him of ferrofluid. Under Zara's guidance, he learned to manipulate its basic properties using magnetic field generators he'd originally built for metal detection projects.
"The programmable matter responds to specific electromagnetic signature patterns," Zara explained as Marcus practiced basic manipulation techniques.
"Each pattern encodes different molecular configurations and quantum properties."
"So it's like 3D printing with smart matter that can change its own properties based on the control signals we send it?"
"A crude but accurate description, yes."
"I can work with crude but accurate."
Marcus loaded the programmable matter into his modified printer and began the delicate process of rebuilding the damaged interface connections.
"What's our target pattern for the first interface?"
Zara provided quantum specifications that her ship's computer translated into electromagnetic control patterns. Marcus fed these patterns into his printer's control system and watched as the programmable matter began flowing into the damaged connection points, rebuilding the crystal and flower structures layer by microscopic layer. The process was hypnotic to watch. Under the influence of precisely controlled electromagnetic fields, the liquid metal matter formed itself into structures that looked like they'd been grown rather than manufactured. Delicate crystalline branches extended and interconnected with mathematical precision, creating three-dimensional patterns that seemed to capture and focus invisible energies. "Quantum field resonance is stabilizing," Zara reported, monitoring the repair through her ship's diagnostic systems.
"Interface connectivity is improving."
"Good.
How many more interfaces do we need to rebuild?"
17 primary connections and 43 secondary pathways." Marcus looked at the complexity of the single interface he'd just completed and did quick mental calculations. "At this rate, we're looking at another 10 or 12 hours of work."
"The repairs must be completed before dawn," Zara said quietly.
"My ship's emergency power systems will fail within 6 hours if the primary energy distribution system is not restored."
"And if the power fails while we're in the middle of interface reconstruction?"
"The quantum entanglement states will collapse permanently. The ship will become inoperable." Marcus checked his watch. It was already past midnight, and fatigue was beginning to affect his concentration. The interface repair work required absolute precision. Any mistake could cascade through the quantum system and destroy hours of progress. "Okay, we need to pick up the pace," he decided.
"Can we repair multiple interfaces simultaneously?"
"The quantum field interactions would interfere with each other. Sequential repair is the only safe approach. Then, we need to make each repair faster without sacrificing precision." Marcus studied his 3D printer setup, looking for ways to optimize the process.
What if we pre-program larger batches of matter?
Instead of controlling each layer individually, we could upload entire interface patterns and let the matter self-organize.
The quantum programming complexity would be enormous.
My ship's computer would need to calculate precise electromagnetic field patterns for each molecular position throughout the entire structure.
Can it handle that level of calculation?
Zara communicated with her ship's computer for several minutes, apparently engaged in detailed technical negotiations. Finally, she looked up with something that might have been excitement. The computer indicates it can perform the necessary calculations, but warns that any interruption during the self-organization process could result in matter corruption and potential explosive decompression.
How explosive are we talking?
Sufficient to destroy the ship and create a crater approximately 50 meters in diameter. Marcus considered this information while staring at the remaining damaged interfaces. On the plus side, that's less explosive than the quantum coupling repair would have been.
This is your criteria for acceptable risk? Hey, we're making progress. Yesterday the biggest risk in my life was Mrs. Patterson complaining about my language. Today I'm worried about creating 50-meter craters. I'm moving up in the world. Despite their desperate situation, Zara actually smiled at this.
Your ability to find humor in potentially fatal circumstances is remarkable. It's either laugh or panic, and panicking won't fix your spaceship.
Marcus spent the next hour working with Zara and her ship's computer to develop pre-programmed matter packets for the remaining interface repairs. The process involved encoding quantum field manipulation patterns into electromagnetic signatures that could be uploaded to programmable matter in advance, allowing entire interface structures to self-assemble in minutes rather than hours. The computer has completed programming for 15 interface patterns, Zara announced.
However, it warns that the pre-programmed matter must be used within 30 minutes of activation, or quantum degradation will render it unstable.
30 minutes to complete 15 interfaces, Marcus calculated. 2 minutes per interface, including installation time.
That's cutting it close, but it's doable.
The margin for error is essentially zero. Any delay or mistake will result in matter corruption. Then, we'll just have to not make any mistakes.
Marcus loaded the first pre-programmed matter packet into his printer and positioned it over the next damaged interface.
Ready?
Marcus, I want you to understand something before we proceed, Zara said seriously. If this repair succeeds, my ship will be fully operational again. I will be able to complete my mission and depart your world.
That's the plan, right?
Yes, but
once I leave, it is unlikely that we will ever encounter each other again.
My mission parameters prohibit ongoing contact with pre-spaceflight civilizations. Marcus paused, his hand hovering over the printer's activation control.
You're saying this is goodbye? I am saying that you should be aware of the implications of success. Marcus found himself oddly reluctant to continue the repair process.
Over the past day, he'd grown accustomed to having Zara around, her different perspective on engineering problems, her dry sense of humor, and her obvious intelligence had made her an excellent working partner. The thought of returning to his quiet workshop and routine repair jobs felt suddenly depressing. Well, he said finally, I guess we'd better make sure we do this right, then. I'd hate for you to be stuck on Earth just because I rushed through the final repairs.
Marcus. I know, Zara. I understand the situation.
But right now, we have 15 interfaces to repair in 30 minutes, and standing here talking about it won't get the job done. Marcus activated the first pre-programmed matter packet and watched as it flowed into the damaged interface structure. Unlike the slow, controlled growth of the earlier repair, this matter moved with purpose and speed, organizing itself into the complex crystalline pattern within seconds. Interface 1 complete, Marcus announced, moving to the next damaged connection.
14 to go.
The next 25 minutes passed in a blur of intense concentration and barely controlled urgency. Marcus moved from interface to interface with mechanical precision, activating matter packets and monitoring their self-organization while Zara tracked quantum field stability and energy distribution throughout the ship's systems.
Interface 7 complete. Quantum resonance nominal. Interface 12 complete. Energy flow stable. Interface 15 complete.
All primary connections restored. As Marcus activated the final pre-programmed matter packet and watched it complete the last interface repair, Zara's ship suddenly came alive around them. Lights that had been dim under emergency power blazed to full intensity, displays that had been blank began showing status information in flowing alien symbols, and a subtle vibration through the ship's structure indicated that major systems were powering up. Primary energy distribution restored, Zara announced, her voice filled with relief and satisfaction.
All ship systems nominal.
We did it, Marcus. The repairs are complete. Marcus sat back on his heels, exhausted but triumphant.
We actually fixed an alien spaceship.
Using a 3D printer and some electromagnets I built from spare parts. Your methodology was unconventional, but remarkably effective, Zara agreed.
My ship's computer has updated its probability calculations for human engineering capabilities.
Your species has been reclassified as capable of achieving impossible results through deterministic improvisation.
That might be the best professional review I've ever gotten.
As Zara ran final diagnostic checks on her ship's systems, Marcus gathered his tools and equipment. The repair work was complete, which meant their brief partnership was coming to an end. Despite knowing this moment was inevitable, he found himself reluctant to leave the alien vessel and return to his normal life.
The ship is fully operational, Zara reported. I can depart at any time.
Great.
That's really great. Marcus shouldered his tool bag and tried to inject enthusiasm into his voice. Mission accomplished.
You can get back to whatever mysterious alien things you were doing before you crashed here.
Marcus. Zara's tone made him look up from organizing his equipment.
I want you to know that working with you has been educational.
Your approach to engineering challenges is unlike anything in my experience.
Yeah, well, you're a pretty good engineering partner yourself. Even if you do use impossible physics to solve problems. They stood looking at each other for a moment, two engineers from different worlds who had somehow managed to collaborate on the most complex repair either of them had ever attempted.
Marcus was searching for something appropriate to say when Zara's ship's computer began projecting urgent-looking symbols into the air.
What's that about?
Marcus asked. Zara's expression shifted to surprise as she read the display.
My ship's computer has detected an incoming transmission on quantum entanglement frequencies.
Someone is trying to contact me. I thought you said no one would come looking for you. No one should.
My mission is operating under communication silence protocols. Zara activated her ship's communication systems, and the air filled with the musical tones of her language as she responded to the incoming transmission. The conversation lasted several minutes, during which Zara's expression shifted from confusion to concern to something that looked like alarm. Finally, she closed the communication channel and turned to Marcus with an expression he'd never seen before. That was my mission, Commander, she said quietly. There's been a development that changes everything.
What kind of development?
The kind that means my mission parameters have just been significantly expanded, Zara replied.
And the kind that means I'm going to need your help again.
Marcus felt a surge of excitement mixed with apprehension.
What exactly are we talking about here?
I'm talking about the possibility that your world is about to become far more interesting than either of us anticipated, Zara said grimly. And the possibility that the repair work we just completed was only the beginning of our collaboration. As if summoned by her words, the night sky above Peterson's cornfield began to show new lights, points of brilliance that definitely weren't stars and were moving in patterns that no earthly aircraft could manage.
Marcus looked up at the impossible lights, then at Zara, then back at his tool bag.
I get the feeling this is going to be another long night. Marcus, Zara said seriously, I believe you should prepare yourself for the possibility that this may be a very long night indeed. The lights in the sky weren't just moving, they were descending. What had started as distant points of brilliance were resolving into distinct shapes as they approached Earth's atmosphere. Marcus counted at least 12 separate objects, each one following a precise flight pattern that spoke of advanced technology and coordinated purpose. Please tell me those are more of your people coming to help, Marcus said, though Zara's expression suggested the situation wasn't that simple. They are ships from the Hegemony Survey Fleet, Zara replied, her tone carefully neutral. However, their presence here indicates that my mission has been compromised.
Compromised how?
Zara activated her ship's external communication systems and began transmitting what sounded like identification codes. The response came immediately, a harsh, metallic voice speaking in her musical language but with an undertone that even Marcus could recognize as authoritative and unfriendly. They are ordering me to power down my ship and prepare for boarding, Zara translated. They claim I have violated survey protocols and exceeded my mission parameters.
Have you? That depends on one's interpretation of survey protocols. Zara's fingers danced over her ship's control interfaces.
My mission was to observe your world's technological development and report on humanity's potential for spaceflight capability.
Providing direct assistance to a human engineer could be considered outside normal parameters. So you're in trouble because you helped me fix your ship?
I am in trouble because I allowed a pre-spaceflight human to gain detailed knowledge of advanced technology.
From the hegemony's perspective, this represents a significant violation of non-interference directives.
Marcus watched the approaching ships grow larger and more distinct. They were sleek, angular craft that looked designed for intimidation as much as transportation.
Unlike Zara's elegant exploration vessel, these ships projected an aura of military purpose. What happens if they board your ship and find me here?
You would likely be subjected to memory modification to remove all knowledge of advanced technology and extraterrestrial contact. I would be arrested and face trial for violation of survey protocols.
Memory modification sounds unpleasant.
It is generally considered preferable to termination, which would be the alternative under strict interpretation of contamination prevention protocols.
Marcus felt his stomach drop. They would kill me to preserve their secret?
The hegemony places great importance on managing technological development among emerging civilizations. Premature exposure to advanced technology is considered dangerous both to the emerging species and to galactic stability in general.
Right.
Because we might use your technology to blow ourselves up or start interstellar wars.
Among other concerns, yes.
Marcus looked at Zara, then at her ship's control systems, then back at the approaching hegemony vessels.
So what are our options here? Technically, my options are to surrender peacefully and hope for lenient treatment during trial proceedings.
Your options are to submit to memory modification or attempt to flee and hope they don't consider you worth pursuing.
Those are terrible options.
Yes, they are. Marcus walked to the edge of the ship's hull breach and stared up at the approaching vessels. In the distance, he could see more lights appearing. It looked like the entire hegemony fleet was converging on Peterson's cornfield. The peaceful rural landscape that had been his home for 32 years was about to become the center of what amounted to an alien law enforcement operation.
How much time do we have before they get here? Approximately 11 minutes at their current descent rate. 11 minutes. Marcus turned back to Zara, his mind racing through possibilities. Is there any chance we could get your ship airborne before they arrive?
The ship is fully operational, but attempting to flee would only confirm my guilt and escalate the response. They would pursue and potentially use force to prevent my escape.
What about hiding? Could we conceal your ship somehow? Not from hegemony sensors.
They can detect quantum signatures from orbit. Marcus began pacing within the confines of the ship's interior, his engineer's mind automatically searching for solutions to what seemed like an impossible problem. The approaching ships represented overwhelming technological superiority, numerical advantage, and legal authority within their own civilization.
Any direct confrontation would end badly. But there might be another approach. Zara, what exactly are the survey protocols you're supposed to be following? Non-interference with pre-spaceflight civilizations.
Observation only, with strict prohibition against technology transfer or direct assistance to indigenous populations.
But, you haven't actually transferred technology to me, have you?
I mean, you haven't given me any alien devices or taught me how to build quantum engines or anything like that. No, but you have gained extensive knowledge of our engineering principles and construction methods.
Have I, though?
Marcus stopped pacing and faced Zara directly.
Think about what actually happened here.
You had a problem with your ship's quantum coupling matrix. I applied standard thermal and acoustic engineering techniques using equipment I already possessed.
The principles I used were entirely human-developed technologies.
But the application of those principles to quantum systems was guided by your ship's computer providing translated specifications. I never directly interfaced with your technology or learned to manipulate quantum fields myself. I just applied heat and sound in patterns your computer told me would work.
Zara's expression shifted as she followed Marcus's reasoning.
You are suggesting that what occurred here was not technology transfer but rather collaborative problem solving using existing indigenous capabilities.
Exactly. You provided the theoretical knowledge, I provided the practical application.
But all the actual technology and methodology came from human engineering.
You could argue that this falls within survey protocols because you didn't actually teach me anything I couldn't have figured out myself given enough time and the right problem to solve. The hegemony tribunal would never accept such an interpretation. Maybe not, but it might create enough legal ambiguity to avoid the worst consequences. Especially if we can demonstrate that human engineering capability is more advanced than originally estimated.
Zara consulted her ship's computer, apparently running calculations on Marcus's proposed legal strategy. The computer indicates a 23% probability that such an argument might succeed in reducing charges from protocol violation to exceeding survey methodology guidelines.
What's the penalty for exceeding survey methodology guidelines? Formal reprimand and reassignment to less critical observation duties. That's a lot better than arrest and trial for protocol violation.
Yes, but it still does not address your situation. Even if I avoid serious charges, you have still been exposed to advanced technology and gained knowledge that could accelerate your civilization's development.
Marcus grinned, the pieces of a plan finally coming together in his mind. Actually, that might not be as much of a problem as you think. I've got an idea, but it's going to require some quick work and a bit of creative engineering. What are you proposing?
I'm proposing that when the hegemony investigators get here, they find exactly what survey protocols would expect them to find: a crashed alien ship that was repaired using entirely indigenous human technology, with no evidence of advanced technology transfer or contamination. How could we possibly? Zara began, then stopped as she understood what Marcus was suggesting. You want to conceal the quantum nature of the repairs we performed.
I want to replace the quantum engineering with human engineering. Marcus was already pulling tools from his kit. How much time would it take your ship's fabrication systems to create conventional electronic components that could mimic the basic functions of your quantum systems? The quantum coupling matrix cannot be replaced with conventional electronics. The power requirements alone not replaced, simulated.
Just enough to fool a quick inspection and demonstrate that the ship could theoretically be repaired using human technology. We're not trying to actually power your ship with car batteries and radio parts, we just need to show that it's theoretically possible.
Zara's expression shifted to something Marcus was beginning to recognize as her look of horrified fascination with human problem-solving methodology.
You propose to construct a facade of primitive electronics that appears to perform quantum engineering functions?
Exactly.
The hegemony investigators will scan your ship, see that it was repaired using what looks like crude but functional human technology, and conclude that while your survey methods were questionable, no actual technology transfer occurred.
The deception would need to be extraordinarily sophisticated. Hegemony sensors can analyze systems at the molecular level.
Then, we'll need to build our fake components at the molecular level.
Can your ship's fabrication systems do that?
Yes, but the complexity of programming conventional electronics to mimic quantum behavior.
Zara trailed off, apparently running calculations.
It would require creating a complete functional simulation of quantum effects using classical physics principles.
Is that possible?
Theoretically, yes.
Practically, it would be among the most complex engineering challenges my ship's computer has ever attempted.
Marcus looked up at the approaching hegemony vessels, now clearly visible as distinct spacecraft with running lights and what looked like sensor arrays.
We've got about 8 minutes. Can your computer pull it off in 8 minutes? Unknown. The computational requirements are at the very edge of my ship's processing capabilities.
Then, we'd better get started.
Marcus began disconnecting his diagnostic equipment from Zara's ship systems. What do you need me to do?
For the next several minutes, Marcus and Zara worked with desperate efficiency to create what amounted to the most elaborate technological shell game in history. Zara's ship computer began fabricating conventional electronic components, transistors, capacitors, resistors, and integrated circuits that were designed to interface with human diagnostic equipment while creating sensor signatures that mimicked quantum engineering effects. Meanwhile, Marcus rapidly constructed mounting frameworks and connection systems that would allow the fake components to be installed over the real quantum systems. The goal wasn't to actually replace the alien technology, but to create a convincing facade that would pass inspection by investigators who expected to find primitive human engineering. Electronic simulation components complete, Zara announced as her ship's fabrication systems produced components that looked remarkably like advanced but recognizable Earth technology.
Installing facade systems now. How are we doing on time? Hegemony vessels will be in landing position in approximately 4 minutes.
Marcus helped Zara install the simulation electronics, working with the desperate speed of someone trying to defuse a bomb. The fake components had to be positioned precisely to create the right sensor signatures while being connected to his actual diagnostic equipment to provide plausible evidence of human engineering involvement.
Marcus, I need you to understand something, Zara said as they completed the installation process.
If this deception fails, the consequences for both of us will be severe. But, if it succeeds, you will need to maintain the illusion for the rest of your life. You can never reveal what truly happened here.
I understand. But, Zara, I need you to understand something too. What we did here wasn't really deception. We did repair your ship using human engineering principles guided by your theoretical knowledge. The quantum stuff was just the implementation details. Implementation details that involved manipulating fundamental forces of the universe. Every technology is about manipulating fundamental forces. The difference is just a matter of sophistication and understanding.
As they spoke, bright lights began illuminating the cornfield around them. The hegemony vessels were beginning their landing approach, their powerful illumination systems turning Peterson's abandoned farm into something resembling a spaceport.
Final systems check, Zara announced, scanning their hastily constructed facade. Electronic simulation systems nominal. Quantum components concealed within acceptable parameters. Diagnostic equipment shows human technology signatures. Will it fool their sensors? For a basic inspection, yes. For detailed analysis. Zara shrugged. We are about to discover the limits of hasty engineering.
The first hegemony vessel touched down at the edge of the cornfield, followed quickly by 2 others. Marcus could see figures in metallic suits emerging from the ships, presumably the investigators who would determine both their fates.
Unlike Zara's elegant exploration vessel, these ships looked purely functional, designed for efficiency rather than aesthetics. Last chance to run, Zara said quietly. And, miss the chance to see how this turns out? Not likely. Marcus shouldered his tool bag and tried to project confidence he didn't entirely feel.
Besides, someone needs to stick around to explain the human engineering aspects of the repair work. You realize they will scan you for knowledge of advanced technology. Then, I guess we'd better hope our story holds up under scrutiny. As the hegemony investigators approached Zara's ship, Marcus found himself oddly calm. The past day had been the most exciting, terrifying, and satisfying of his life. He'd helped repair an alien spacecraft, learned principles of engineering he'd never imagined, and formed an unlikely partnership with someone from another world. Whatever happened next, it had been worth the risk. One more thing, Marcus, Zara said as the investigators reached the hull breach. Whatever the outcome of this investigation, I want you to know that working with you has been an honor. Your species shows remarkable potential. Thanks, Zara. It's been one hell of an education. The lead investigator appeared at the hull breach tall, imposing, and radiating authority. When he spoke, his words were translated into English by what Marcus assumed was the same type of device Zara used. Survey Operative Zaraka, you are under investigation for potential violation of non-interference protocols. Please prepare for immediate inspection of your vessel and mission logs. Understood, Investigator. However, I should inform you that I have received assistance from the indigenous population in repairing critical ship systems. The human engineer present was necessary for completion of repairs using available technological resources. The investigator's gaze shifted to Marcus, who tried to look like someone who belonged in an alien spacecraft. Human engineer, identify yourself and explain your presence. Marcus Chen, mechanical engineer, Marcus replied, trying to keep his voice steady. I provided technical assistance for repair of damaged ship systems using locally available equipment and methodology. You claim to have repaired advanced technology using primitive methods? I claim to have applied standard thermal and acoustic engineering techniques to repair what turned out to be a very sophisticated but fundamentally understandable energy distribution system, Marcus corrected. The principles were familiar, even if the application was more complex than anything I'd worked on before. The investigator studied Marcus for a long moment, apparently trying to decide whether he was dealing with unprecedented human engineering capability or evidence of technology transfer violation. Finally, he activated what appeared to be a scanning device and began examining the ship's repair work. Marcus held his breath as the alien scanner passed over their carefully constructed facade, hoping that Zara's simulation electronics would create convincing sensor readings.
The next few minutes would determine whether their desperate plan had any chance of success.
The investigator's expression remained unreadable as he completed his initial scan, but he didn't immediately order their arrest, which Marcus took as a positive sign.
"Interesting," the investigator murmured. "Most interesting indeed."
The hegemony investigator spent nearly an hour examining every aspect of the repair work, scanning components with devices that made Marcus's diagnostic equipment look like stone tools. 2 additional investigators joined him, each running their own analyses and speaking in rapid bursts of the musical alien language. Marcus and Zara stood to one side, watching their fate being decided by beings whose thought processes and motivations remained largely mysterious. "The quantum coupling matrix shows evidence of thermal and acoustic manipulation," one investigator reported, his words automatically translated for Marcus's benefit. "However, the energy patterns are consistent with indigenous technology application rather than direct quantum field manipulation." "Confirmed," replied another. "The interface connections display molecular restructuring consistent with primitive programmable matter techniques, but the programming patterns suggest external computational assistance rather than advanced matter manipulation knowledge." Marcus caught Zara's eye and saw the barely concealed relief in her expression. Their hastily constructed facade was apparently holding up under scrutiny. "Human engineer," the lead investigator addressed Marcus directly, "explain your understanding of the repair procedures you performed." Marcus took a deep breath, knowing this was the critical moment. The ship's energy distribution system had suffered cascade failure due to impedance mismatches in the primary coupling matrix. "I applied controlled thermal cycling to restore molecular flexibility in the damaged crystalline structures, then used precisely calibrated acoustic frequencies to guide the reorganization process back to optimal configurations." "And how did you determine the correct thermal and acoustic parameters?" "The ship's computer provided diagnostic data that I was able to interpret using standard engineering principles. Frequency analysis, harmonic relationships, and thermal characteristics are the same whether you're working on a car engine or a spacecraft energy system." The investigator's expression suggested he found this answer either impressive or troubling, possibly both. "You claim to have repaired advanced energy distribution systems using primitive diagnostic equipment?" "I claim to have applied universal engineering principles to solve a complex but understandable problem," Marcus corrected. "The physics involved aren't really different from what we use in terrestrial applications, they're just implemented at a much more sophisticated level." "Show me," the investigator commanded. For the next 30 minutes, Marcus demonstrated his repair methodology using his own equipment connected to Zara's simulation electronics. He explained frequency analysis, thermal control systems, and acoustic field generation while the hegemony investigators watched with what appeared to be growing amazement. "The human's technological approach is remarkably sophisticated for a pre-spaceflight civilization," one investigator noted. "His understanding of energy system relationships demonstrates intuitive grasp of principles we considered beyond indigenous capability." "Furthermore," added another, "the repair methodology, while unconventional, represents genuine engineering innovation rather than technology transfer application. The human appears to have independently developed techniques that achieve quantum-level precision using classical physics approaches." Marcus tried to look modest while internally celebrating the success of their deception. The investigators were reaching exactly the conclusions he and Zara had hoped for, that human engineering was more advanced than expected, but that no alien technology had been transferred. The lead investigator turned to Zara. "Survey Operative Zaraka, explain your role in these repairs." "I provided theoretical guidance and translated ship diagnostic data into formats the human engineer could interpret," Zara replied carefully. "However, all actual repair work was performed using indigenous human technology and methodology." "You maintained strict non-interference protocols throughout the repair process?" "I provided no technology, taught no advanced engineering principles, and took no direct action to modify or improve indigenous capabilities. My role was limited to theoretical consultation and diagnostic translation." The lead investigator consulted with his colleagues in their musical language for several minutes. Marcus caught fragments of what sounded like debate, with some investigators apparently arguing for strict interpretation of protocol violations while others seemed to support Zara's explanation. Finally, the lead investigator activated a recording device and began speaking in formal tones. Investigation findings: Survey operative Zaraka exceeded standard non-interference guidelines by providing direct assistance to indigenous population. However, analysis confirms that no technology transfer occurred and no indigenous capabilities were artificially enhanced beyond natural development parameters. He paused, considering his words carefully.
The human engineer's capabilities represent previously undetected advancement in this civilization's engineering sophistication.
The repair methodologies employed demonstrate indigenous innovation rather than contamination from advanced technology exposure.
What's the verdict? Marcus asked.